Welcome to Indiana Sports Beat Radio, presented by Wow Food Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Know your role and shut your mouth, you jabroni!
Fires upfield into the end zone, and it's caught. Jelani Woods, touchdown! INDY!
A 43-point night for Tyrese Halliburton.
How do you like that, partner?
Galloway drives all the way to the hole, throws it up, got it! Indiana's got their first lead of this contest.
I mean, that's a goddamn Emmy winner right there.
Now, from the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios, here's your host, Jim Coyle.
Hey, hello everybody. Welcome aboard. Thanks a lot for being with us on this Wednesday, October 25. Getting closer and closer to Halloween. Hope you're having a good day or had a good day. And if not, hopefully we can make it a little bit better. Appreciate you being with us as always. On the program today, Dylan Sinn from the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette will join us. Kyle Neddenriep from the Indy Star and our Hall of Famer, Rick Bozich. And we've got plenty more to talk about in between. Kelvin Sampson talks about joining the Big 12, which that should be a hell of a, the Big 12 is already pretty damn good basketball conference, but now you're adding Houston to that, in addition to Cincinnati, BYU, and CFU. But Joe Lunardi had his first, bracketology out, which means that's like putting out a top 25 the day after the bowl season ends. It means absolutely jack. I'm going to start replacing the S word with Jack. That means Jack. But we'll talk about it just because it's fun to talk about. And how about our boys in maize and blue? Woohoo! Need the cuckoo clock to come out. Man, first of all, yesterday, Michigan applied for a liquor license to begin selling alcohol at sporting events. Can you imagine the money they will generate selling beer just at the Big House? They're already making like $6 million a game. Gives them plenty enough money to operate a spy ring. Oh, did I say that out loud? My bad. Boy, oh boy, are we going to talk about that. And I cannot wait because this is growing. The spy scandal at Michigan has continues to escalate. The personnel, employee, whatever you want to call it, that has been suspended. And as this gets deeper and deeper, there's like no way that everyone at the top didn't know. First of all, before we get into that, shout out to everybody jumping on the Andy Moore Honda hotline early and often. Fred, how are you, sir? Cody up in Fort Wayne, appreciate you. Said a great show yesterday. We try to make them all good, but yeah, sometimes they're just better than others. And as I mentioned in the comments, Fran Frischilla was spectacular, partly because he's a guy you could sit down at a bar with, have a beer, have nachos, whatever you wanted to have, and just sit there and chat. What an incredibly great guy, but great at what he does. Very fortunate for him to take his time to join us, and hopefully we'll get him back on the show this year during basketball season. Larry, Las Vegas Larry. Forrest jumping on from South Georgia. Heath down in Danville, Kentucky. Dave G. He's in southeastern Indiana. But we really need to get on some stations over there, Dave. Find a station that you think that we should be on there. And first of all, let them know and then let me know. Kent from Mount Pleasant, Michigan. You know, I had a rodeo in Mount Pleasant, Michigan. I remember that back in my days. Gritty. And with a shout out to Coach Knight, happy birthday to Bob. I think he was 84. I'm going to guess before looking it up. Dabney, says he was surprised Trace didn't get a minute last night. Well, it's the regular season, boys. Things change. And yes, that things will change. Kevin, on from B-Town. Appreciate you. Let's see. My man Pete up in Cicero and points out Trace is injured, or at least was out because of that last night. So that explains that. Justin B on. He's killing us he's killing it on the Pick'em, college Pick'em. We'll look at that today too. Good time here in the middle of the week to check that out. Five Lefts. My man, what's up? How are you, sir? Let's see. Gritty says she saw he was in town recently. You talking about Coach? Philip talks, oh yeah, Diamondbacks and the Rangers. Who had that on their bingo card? Man, I mean, you got to give it to the Diamondbacks. And I remember talking to the other night at Hoosier Hysteria. We were watching the game from press row, and the Phillies had gone up 2-0, and they went to Phoenix, I think, with a 2-0 lead. In game 3, they were poised to go 3-0, and they got walked off by the Diamondbacks with a single, but the Diamondbacks win in a walk-off fashion to get back into the series. Then they win that next game, and I remember turning, I said, that walk-off, that is what changes a series, man. And then you win the second game, all bets are off, and they do the unthinkable, and they're able to pitch through one of the best hitting barrages we've seen in a while in the playoffs from the Phillies. But we'll get back to that, more of that here in a minute. But gee whiz. Jamie jumping on from Grand Rapids, Michigan. Probably a little getting chilly up there. I bet it's beautiful, though. Tony says hello as well down in Owensboro, barbecue capital of the region. Let's call it that. It's Buffalo Bill. He's up in the UP, baby. I had a rodeo up there too in Iron River, Michigan, which is in the UP. I remember traveling up there. Such a beautiful, beautiful place up there. Unbelievable. Let's see. Make sure I didn't miss anybody. I think I got everybody in. So there you go. Yeah, baseball, man, the World Series is set. The Diamondbacks and the Rangers. Rangers haven't been in since 2011. I don't know. Have the Diamondbacks ever been in the World Series? I don't know. They were an expansion team, so that's hard to, without looking that up. I don't know. But damn it. Oh, and I didn't want to forget that. Did you miss? I think it was the night before last. Andrew Saalfrank, a former Indiana Hoosier pitcher with the Diamondbacks, headed to the World Series, but was facing Kyle Schwarber, another Hoosier. And I can't remember if he struck him out, but I think he got him out one way or another. But that was a cool moment for Indiana baseball and Indiana baseball fans. And a shout out to Coach Jeff. He has to be proud of that. Rudy the Boxer is on as well. Oh, we're talking politics. Man, we're talking basketball. But welcome aboard. Tony asks, who do I think will be the leading scorer for Indiana this year? Good question. That is a good question. And I think that's going to take a little while for that to ferret itself out. And I don't know that you're going to have one that is far and away the leader, because this team seems to be what has to be more balanced than what you've seen in years past. First of all, it was the Trace Jackson Davis show. So Trace was going to get his in every night. He was going to get the ball. You don't have that guy per se this season. Mackenzie Mbako is expected to do a lot from a shooting standpoint and scoring standpoint. Xavier Johnson, we know that even though he's the point guard, he likes to make it happen. You definitely do not want your point guard being your leading scorer. If that's the case, not sure how your offense is being run. But if I had to guess, I would guess Mackenzie Mbako. But that's all right, Rudy. We're all good. I would, if I had to guess, Mackenzie Mbako, he's a wing. That's a guy that's going to get the ball a lot. He's a shooter. He's big enough to get to the rim. Kel'el Ware, well, I think that he's going to do fine. I don't know. I don't see him as the leading scorer. I don't see him as the go-to guy. But at 7 foot, I'd go to him as often as possible. So it's going to be Malik Renew, Trey Galloway as well. You need scoring from all of these guys. For Indiana to be a better team, you need scoring from all of them. Like, back in the day, an Indiana roster would have 5 guys that averaged double figures, 11, 12 points. Well, it didn't. Sometimes you'd have one that's Calbert Chaney that was averaging whatever he would average, 18 or whatever, but you'd still have a lot of guys that averaged in double figures. And man, oh man, when you have a starting 5 that averages double figures, and I don't care if it's 10 points apiece, that's a guaranteed 50 points a night right there, which you're getting more elsewhere and somebody else is going to score more. But balanced scoring is what you want. A balanced lineup, a balanced rotation, a balanced set of second unit guys. Going to be interesting to see how CJ Gunn, Caleb Banks, then you got guys like Anthony Walker. I'm not sure what their role is going to be. Other than coming off the bench and whatnot, but we've got plenty to talk about and plenty of people to talk to. Dylan Sinn, he's up next. We'll get to it and more here on Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Thanks a lot for being with us, and we're back right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Wow Food Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Well, they could sure use 13 points a game from him, 5 lefts. That would be a welcomed sight. And Yogi was a great scorer. There's nothing wrong with your point guard being a good scorer. You want him. That's a great thing. And Xavier, we know, can get to the rim fast. And that's part of what makes him dangerous. Either if he doesn't get to the rim, if he's able to dish it. And of course, he's been working on his shooting as well. Xavier's not like your typical point guard. He's more like a 1-2. And Trey Galloway is a solid 2. But you need Trey Galloway to shoot more. Period. I think he tried to stay out of the way a lot last year, knowing that it was the Jalen Hood-Schifino and Trace Jackson Davis show, and then you had Miller Kopp that was supposed to be the guy after that. Good morning, good sir.
Good morning.
How are things in Fort Wayne?
Doing well. Getting ready for for everything that's coming up the next couple of weeks. It's going to be a lot.
Oh, what all you got on your schedule?
We're running basketball previews for high school and college for basically this next week and a half, 2 weeks stretch here. So it's all of that.
That'll keep you busy. I definitely want to talk about, there's a school just to the north of you having a little problem right now.
Sure.
Big old problem. How about that? It just keeps growing. But I didn't know anything about it. I knew nothing. The guy's on the sideline working with coordinators, but I knew nothing about it. Colonel Klink. I wish you could pull that out up, John. I know nothing. No, that wasn't Klink. That was Sergeant Schultz. I know nothing. I know nothing.
Sounds like a Nazi. Or sounds like you're saying Nazi.
Well, he was a Nazi. It was from a TV show, Hogan's Heroes.
Oh, there you go.
Americans were in a Nazi prisoner camp, but they were purposely staying in the prisoner camp because they were actually spies, and they could come and go as they wanted, but they were just using it for information.
All right, here we go, guys.
44040, the golf club at Eagle Point in Bloomington.
This segment is brought to you by Remax Advanced Realty, Indie Home Pros team by Cheryl Sizemore. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Wow Food Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Hey, welcome back. We appreciate you so much for joining us here from high atop the 18th fairway, the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios, where you can get your early bird membership right now. Best prices going, and trust me, if you're an individual, you can get a membership that works out to be about $150 a month, all in, baby. I don't think you can beat that. So, if you're a golfer, something you might want to consider. Welcome aboard, Dylan Sinn from the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette. My man, Dylan, how are you, sir?
I'm good, Jim. I'm good. Thanks, as always, for having me on. Glad to be with you. There you go. I like the shirt. Outstanding stuff. Look at that.
I had not displayed it yet. People had not seen it entirely, but I am wearing my Penix Envy shirt.
Yeah.
I saw that, and I'm like, oh, got to have that. That's funny. And how JJ McCarthy has taken the lead, quote unquote, lead over him, to me is a joke. And this was before anything about Michigan came out. Michigan has beaten nobody, one. They played no one. He's having a solid year, but against no one.
Sure.
Michael Penix is having a second unbelievable season. He's beaten an Oregon team that I still think is a top 10 team.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oregon probably should have won that game, but they're that good. Bo Nix is that good. Oregon is good enough to me to be in the college football playoffs. Probably won't make it because of the loss. But they're very, very good.
They're going to get more than likely they're going to get a second chance at Washington in that Pac-12 championship game. So don't count them out of the playoffs yet. But I think you're right. I think it was Penix did not play well Saturday night against Arizona State, right? And I do think that now when you say take the lead, what you mean is the odds makers in Vegas, right? I do think
flavor of the day, basically.
Right. I do think that was an overreaction. I do think that if the season ended today, I think that Michael Penix probably wins the award. I think he deserves it. I do think that we're going to see JJ McCarthy against Penn State and Ohio State before the end of the season. This will shake itself out. And Michael Penix has plenty of games against good teams left. Michael Penix is going to. I know USC isn't very good. I know that, but USC draws a lot of eyeballs. and Michael Penix is going to get to go out and put up 500 passing yards against that USC secondary, which is no good. So we're going to see JJ McCarthy. We're going to see JJ McCarthy against two of the best defenses in the country by the end of the season. So that'll shake itself out. Probably three of the best defenses in the country, because he's going to have to go through Ohio State and Penn State, and then if Michigan makes the Big Ten championship game, he'd have to go through Iowa too, probably. Then maybe Wisconsin, but so it'll shake itself out. I do think that
going through Iowa like taking a hot knife through butter.
Not on defense. Iowa's defense is one of the best in the country. There's really no doubt about that. They can't score, so it doesn't matter. They're not going to win. They're not going to do anything special, but their defense statistically is one of the best in the whole country, especially their pass defense. So it's not so easy to put up 40 on them. You're going to beat them. If Michigan played Iowa, they'd win, and it would be something like 20-3. But it would be a tough game for JJ McCarthy personally, right? That kind of thing. So we'll see it shake out.
Well, it cracks me up, and it angers me how I think partly it's East Coast bias, because he's way out there, and they have one bad game that they win.
Sure.
And all of a sudden, oh yeah, well, he's not number one anymore. Again, Michigan has beaten freaking nobody, and JJ McCarthy is having a solid year, but he's not lighting it up.
He leads the country in quarterback rating if you want to take that stat seriously, right? Now, obviously,
that reminds me of when Peyton Ramsey was at Indiana, and he was blowing up the percentage. Well, he was throwing wasn't throwing a pass longer than 10 yards.
That's true. McCarthy's ripping the ball, though. Like I'm someone, and just to throw my bias out there, and I don't believe that JJ McCarthy is the best player in the country, but I am a Michigan fan. So I have just personally, I've been a Michigan fan my whole life. So I am someone who watches basically every second of Michigan's games. I think JJ McCarthy is having.
I did not know that about you.
Yeah, you did. Oh, you didn't. Okay, we've never talked about this before. Yes, I've been a Michigan fan my whole life. My dad was a season ticket holder. Or my grandparents were season ticket holders. I used to go to games with my dad when I was younger. So I watch a lot, obviously. But I do think JJ McCarthy is having a very, very good season. He's like, quality of competition aside, he is ripping the ball, right? There were throws, and I know Michigan State's not good. They're not. There's just no way around that. But their defense is not half bad. And he was putting balls in windows that were just so tiny. Now, part of the problem for him is that those windows are going to get even smaller against Ohio State and Penn State. And I think he's going to throw a couple interceptions. So we probably won't be talking about it.
It's really going to hurt when they don't have all of the ahead of game knowledge.
In fairness, that broke last week. They went out and beat Michigan State 49-0. So we're talking
about Michigan State here. I doubt that they bought any tickets to the Indiana game either. To any Indiana games. These were certain games that they bought, but we'll get to that.
Sure.
Michael Penix still leads the country in passing yards, which he has all season long. Yeah. Number 2 is a shock to me. Do you know who number 2 is? Jaden Daniels from LSU.
Yeah, so that's another one. I think we're going to see. I think if
when does somebody in the SEC throw the ball like that?
Well, they have to, because LSU's defense is so bad that they've gotten in a bunch of track meets, and they're going to when they play Alabama. I think we might have a new leader in a couple of weeks, because when they play Alabama in 2 weeks, LSU, if Daniels has a good game in that game and they win, I think it's going to kind of put him right back in the mix for the Heisman. I think he's number 3 right now in terms of odds for the Heisman Trophy. And I think if he wins against Alabama, I think he's right back in the mix, even though LSU's already lost twice. One of their losses was to Ole Miss, and LSU scored 49 points in that game. It was not his fault that they lost that game.
Well, as I'm looking down the list of passing yards, there is no JJ McCarthy on it.
Yeah. Well, it's because Michigan. Well, that's because he's been throwing. He hasn't played the fourth quarter of most of these games, right? Like if you put yards per attempt,
neither does Michael Penix.
That's true. They played a few closer games. Obviously, they played against the last 3 weeks. He's played the entire game. But like yards per attempt, I think JJ McCarthy's top 10.
Michigan has been living on their defense because
but that's the thing is they've been living on their defense is awesome. Don't get me wrong, but their offense is taking a significant leap forward from where it was last year. I mean, they're beating teams by an average of 38 points a game. You don't do that. And yeah, they haven't played anyone, but they've looked awesome doing it. It's not like they're squeaking. It's not like they were USC for the first 6 weeks of the season squeaking by against bad teams. They've blown everyone out of the water. Quite frankly, the worst game they played was against Bowling Green, which could very well, if it comes down to it, tank J.J. McCarthy's Heisman campaign because he threw
who's
three
the
interceptions
quarterback?
against Bowling
Who's the
Green.
quarterback for Bowling Green?
It wasn't Connor Bazelak in that game. It wasn't. He didn't play. I think he was hurt for that game. But Bowling Green is the only team that's really given Michigan a scare, which is kind of funny. And J.J. McCarthy threw 3 interceptions in that game. He has not thrown an interception against anyone else except Bowling Green, which is very funny.
All right, so now we've got to talk about the Michigan scandal.
Sure.
That is getting deeper and deeper. It first broke that Connor Stallions, who it was going around to schools buying tickets to games on both sides of the field, filming their sidelines, has been seen on the sidelines of Michigan talking to coordinators during a game. What am I missing? What else? And now it's coming out that this was going on with certain SEC teams that were either in the SEC championship or potential teams that Michigan would be playing in the college football playoffs. So it looks like they certainly covered their bases, except for not doing it well enough that they didn't get caught. First of all, how did they get caught?
I think it was basically that other teams the rumor is, and this has not been reported. This has not been reported out yet specifically, I don't think. But the rumor is, or the reporting is, that the NCAA is going to be in receipt of footage from the stadium security cameras showing him doing this, or showing him and his like the people that he sent the tickets to doing this with the cameras. Now,
but how did it first come to how did this first come to light that they were doing this is what I'm wondering.
I mean, teams contacted the NCAA and said they thought something was going on, basically. And so the NCAA opened an investigation. So I think that's pretty much how it happened. And then so now the reporting is that they will soon have security footage. I think I have that right. That they will soon have security footage showing them filming with the phone. So that's that. So that is kind of the crux of the issue right now. The biggest question going forward is who knew about this in Michigan, right? Because the reporting was that he was never allowed to talk about this or with Harbaugh, right? So far there's plausible deniability. I don't know how long that's going to stand, because we talked about this earlier. It's very likely that Harbaugh at least knew something was going on. That's kind of how it works. And also, in addition to that, the NCAA has kind of changed up its rules over the last couple of years to kind of say, you are responsible. Like, basically they've tried to close that loophole where it doesn't really matter if they can prove that you knew or not. The idea is that if it's happening in your program, you should know, which is something the NCAA should have been doing all along, right? That is obviously true. If it's happening in your program, you either should know about it or you did know about it. So it's probably going to be a little bit difficult for Michigan or for at least Harbaugh to use that excuse. So the question going forward is how much Harbaugh knew, how much he should have known, and how much this blows back on him versus how much it blows back on Michigan. This is me now switching from reporter to not reporter, just kind of telling you what the reporting is, switching from reporter to pundit, or just kind of the vibes of the situation. I do not think Jim Harbaugh is going to be the coach at Michigan next year. I always thought it was
too much going on.
Yeah, I thought it was unlikely already. I figured that. So he has talked previously, to go back to J.J. McCarthy for a second. He's talked previously about how, and he's been saying it for a couple of years now, how he believes that J.J. McCarthy is one of the best quarterbacks in the history of Michigan. which is pretty much true. Like there have not been that many great prolific quarterbacks in the history of Michigan. That's just not how they've won games over the years. So my thought has always been that Harbaugh will try to ride out to the NFL with McCarthy because McCarthy is a junior. He can go to the NFL. He's probably going to be somewhere a first-round pick, depending on how the rest of the season goes. And so my guess has always been that Harbaugh would try to leave with him. The Chargers seem like the best option the way things are going. Obviously, still some season left there, and Brandon Staley still has that job for now. But my guess is that Harbaugh was not going to be the coach at Michigan next year anyway, considering that McCarthy's gone, Blake Corum is gone. This is Michigan's best chance. This is Michigan's best team since he's been there, and they have a real chance to win a national championship. And it's probably not going to get this good again while he's there. So my guess has always been that he goes to the NFL. Now, I don't know that he's going to have a choice. I would expect that he ends up getting fired because of this. That is not any special reporting that I have. That just seems to be the way this thing is going. And then the question becomes whether the NCAA decides, okay, Harbaugh gets a show cause and he just goes off to the NFL, or does this become a Michigan issue where it's Michigan can't play in a bowl game next year? Or I certainly think they're going to vacate the wins from the last 3 years. But it's a question of are they going to punish Harbaugh more, or are they going to punish Michigan more? I think that's kind of the main question going forward.
And I think it's actually going to be the Big Ten that has more bite than the NCAA, because unfortunately the NCAA has shown they are a toothless 18-year-old dog that has very little bark and zero bite.
So that's interesting though, because I think that this is the NCAA. The NCAA knows that people think that about it, right?
That's because it's true.
But
this is an opportunity for them to do something.
This is an opportunity for them to do something, and it was gift wrapped for them by Michigan.
So was Kansas.
Okay, but Kansas required extensive investigation, right? They had to talk to all these people that the FBI had laid out for them, and they just weren't going to do that. They didn't have the resources, and quite frankly, they didn't want to do it. This one, Harbaugh has been very open about his disdain for the NCAA and his desire to pay players recently. And I don't think that has anything to do with why they're getting caught for this. I think it was because they just did this badly. But I do think the NCAA has an incentive to go after this as hard as they possibly can and show they still have teeth. I don't think you're wrong about the Big Ten. I do think the Big Ten is going to take action on this. But I also think the NCAA, this is their last, I think, before they go into basically hibernation, because at some point in the next couple of years, the NCAA is just not going to be involved in football anymore for a certain group of teams. At least that's my opinion. I think this is their one opportunity to really stick it to someone in a big national case. And I think they have the evidence to do so, and I think they will. I think because Michigan fans, let me tell you something about Michigan fans. They have been saying the same thing you did about the NCAA, and I think they're wrong. I think the NCAA is going to come down hard here, maybe in conjunction with the Big Ten, but it is going to come down hard and say, see, we can still do something. And then the next time something happens and people say, well, why don't you go after this team the way you went after Michigan? The NCAA is going to be like, well, that was a one-time thing.
Well, here's a problem. A source told ESPN that the Big Ten would want to have as full a picture of what the facts actually are.
Sure.
If we were to act, which makes sense, before the NCAA completes its investigation, which would likely not occur until sometime in 2024.
Right.
That leaves us back to what the hell goes on if Michigan, who has had a gravy train schedule up till now.
Sure.
The only teams that they're going to play of substance will be Penn State, who has already lost to Ohio State, and Ohio State, whom they've now beaten for the last couple of years. But maybe after a 7-year losing streak, we see why they were finally able to beat. I mean, the pressure on Jim Harbaugh was immense for not beating Ohio State. And now, the two times they had, there is some really, really bad questions. It's not a good look for Michigan at all.
No.
The entire state of Michigan football is really in a bad place right now. What the hell? We've got a lot of great listeners from up there. Fortunately, they must be fans of teams further south, but what the hell is going on up there?
No. I mean, and to be clear, Michigan's 8-0. Michigan has been the best team in the country this year, right? Like they haven't played.
But have they really been?
They have. Like, okay, again, this broke last week, and Michigan State had a chance to change its signals, and Michigan went on the road and beat Michigan State 49.
I'm not talking about who they've actually beaten, but it's who they've beaten.
Right, but I mean, they are, by efficiency standards, they are the number one team in the country, right? Like, they almost every advanced metric has them number one. Now, again, you're right, they haven't played anyone, but they have played better than anyone else has. Right.
And I think they have an amazing defense. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
But I would like to see them against, I've said it all year, I'd like to see them against a team like Washington.
Yeah.
I would
love
to see them have to those receivers and Michael Penix, or hell, a handful of the Pac-12 teams. Geez, Oregon is one of those. Utah is actually one of those because they're gritty and winter. But I would just love to see them up against an offense that really can do things.
They haven't had to chase. I think that's a very fair point. I think if you play Washington, you get down 7 or 14 points, you got to come back. I don't know if Michigan is built for that. So that is absolutely a fair point. I will say, as it comes to Utah, I'm laying down a marker with my Michigan fandom right now. I do think that if Harbaugh leaves, Michigan should just go to Kyle Whittingham at Utah and just pay him any amount of money to come coach the team. I do think that would be their best play.
I would go after not Michael Penix, but the guy who coaches him.
You want him to go get Kalen DeBoer, but they can't.
If I were Indiana, that's what I would be doing.
Yeah, he's not going to leave Washington for Indiana, though.
No, he has no reason to leave. Seattle is a beautiful place.
Oh,
they
absolutely.
love their football. He has built
there.
Something there. They're going to be in the Big Ten.
Right. I think you could entice Whittingham with cash in a way that you might not be able to entice Kalen DeBoer.
Michigan could pay more than anybody. I mean, my God, right. they already make probably $6 million a game. Yeah. They just applied for a liquor licenses to be able to start selling beer at those places and the Big House. I'm like thinking, holy cow, I could live for probably 5 years on the money they'd have in beer sales at one game at the Big House with 110,000 people there. And they're doing it just to prevent binge drinking. That's why. Whatever.
And to be clear, all that money, what you said, Michigan it's by just about any metric, Michigan is one of the top 5 brands in college football. Maybe not one of the top 5 programs, but they're one of the top 5 brands. And I do think there's been some stuff bandied about if you read some online stuff, and this hasn't been reported at all, but you read some online stuff about how the NCAA is, or not the NCAA, the Big Ten is going to ban Michigan from the Big Ten championship game or make them forfeit games the rest of the season. That is not going to happen.
No, because that's the problem. And that's the problem. That is the problem because the team that is benefiting from all of that has going on is going to be allowed to reap the benefits of what they did, and the punishment will come after the fact. Harbaugh will not be here. He won't care. He'll be off making money in the NFL, leaving this mess behind. The players are not going to pay the price this year. Let's say they go on and win a national championship. What a joke that would be. Even if you took it away later, doesn't matter. The team that they lose to is going to say, bull crap. They shouldn't have been. So it's just so much. We've got to take a break. I've talked too much. We've got Dylan Sinn with us from the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette. We'll be right back with more here on Indiana Sports Beat Radio.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Wow Food Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
I love having this stuff, man. It's awesome. Not that I mean, it's just great banter.
Sure, absolutely.
But enough of that crap. Indiana football. You want to talk about some serious problems? What does Indiana do? People are just they inundate, whether it's to me or the boards, Todd Valley, he's got to go. Nope, they got to fire him. I'm like, what? Okay. Do you all just forget there is a $20 million buyout?
Well,
he's not going to walk away from that. And
the question is, if you're Indiana, do you care about football? And the answer is probably no. They're probably not going to pay it. But
they don't care enough. They don't care $20 million worth.
Maybe they should. You don't want to be.
That's the issue, Dylan. Even though they don't, they're going to get left behind.
Yes.
They're already behind.
No.
That's
they're
true,
going to get cut out of the Big Ten.
You have an opportunity in front of you.
Now, do you really think that would ever happen?
I do. I don't think they will. Okay, let me take that back. I do think that when there becomes like the Super League or whatever that we're heading toward in 10 to 15 years, Indiana will not be part of it. Indiana is not going to be playing the highest level of football in 10 to 15 years. And Ohio State, Michigan, USC, Penn State, Washington, Oregon are.
But what does that say for Purdue, Maryland, Rutgers, every other the bottom part of both current divisions in the Big Ten? They're all in the same boat. With the exception of they have cycles of decent football.
Yeah.
Indiana just has cycles like the toilet bowl swimming.
Right. And so what's happening is for the next 10 to 15 years, you're having a tryout, right? And so the teams that are good, that figure things out in the next 10 to 15 years are going to get invited, whether right or wrong. And the teams that don't are not. I don't think Indiana is going to. And so
Andy, it's $20 million, Andy, until December 1st, 2024.
Right. That's what he's saying. He's saying they could keep him until next season. I don't think that's tenable, but fine. But I think that because there are people in the Indiana fan base, and I'm sure you know many of these people, Jim, and I'm sure some of them are listening, that basically, why should I care about football? Basketball is the thing. It doesn't matter. Just put a team on the field.
It does matter because football is the engine that drives the athletic train.
It's eventually going to burn your basketball program one way or another. That's the problem.
Yes. And that is so if your football team is bad enough, eventually it hurts basketball. And so you need to care about your football team at least to a certain extent.
That's a great discussion.
Here we go. Y'all can talk about this when we come back. Visit garnishcatering.com. That's garnishcatering.com. Garnish Catering is a proud partner of Wow Food Group. This segment is brought to you by The Ugly Grouper. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Wow Food Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on this Wednesday. It's October 25. Thanks a lot for all of you for being with us. Fortunate to have Dylan Sinn from the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette as he joins us each and every Wednesday. And we've had a great, fun discussion about what's going on with Big Ten football and Michigan. But speaking of Big Ten football, how about Indiana? They've got other problems. Maybe they should have cheated. Maybe they should have been cheating because they are just they're in such a horrible position with and no one hates talking about this more than I do. Tom Allen's such a great guy, but I've got to differentiate that and talk about what I'm supposed to talk about, and that is Indiana football it's abysmal, and as a matter of fact, it's some of the worst. But it's hard to say that when Indiana's had some really bad times. But from a standpoint of of knowing what's going on, what's gone on, why it's gone on. It's been a multitude of bad hires, not being able to keep people, losing. Now, sometimes you like the losing the guys to Alabama. Well, that's tough, but what are you going to do? I get that. But not being able to hold on to some of these coaches has hurt them. But the hires to replace, some of them have been just horrible. And then worst of all, not making the fires like Darren Hiller when that should have happened 2 years before it did, because that's part of what put Indiana on this spiral down where they are. Because both of the quarterbacks, you've got 3 quarterbacks that have left in the last couple of years that are all playing on different teams. People can talk about Jack Tuttle all they want, but let me tell you, he's the backup quarterback for Michigan. That says a lot. He beat out a lot of guys for that position. You've got Connor Bazelak, who's over at Bowling Green and doing it's at Bowling Green, but he's having more fun and doing better than he did at Indiana. And then there's this one guy out west that is, to me, is the number one candidate to win the Heisman. All of that was right here and gone. And there's a reason for that. And Indiana is in such a bad position because of bad contracts. I've said this, Indiana has to stop doing their own hiring and contract writing. And contracts need to change. All of these clauses for benefits. Well, if you do this, well, we'll give you a $250,000. Well, and if the players all jump across the road, we'll give you another $250,000. And if you make a bowl game, we're going to give you a whole nother extension on the contract. If you just go 6-6, but if you suck for 3 years, nothing happens. It has to go both ways. There has to be clauses for success in these contracts. It's kind of similar to what Iowa was forced to do with Kirk Ferentz's son at OC, which that's not going to be close to being reached. I don't think.
And also, they're not going to fire him. Also, they're not going to fire him. By the way, the contract says they have to. Exactly. So here's my thing. When Tom Allen went 6-2 in 2020, and they were a top 15 team that year, there was a clamor from the fan base, correctly, in my opinion. Invest in the team. Go give this guy a contract that is worthy of a big-time football program. And they did that, right? The original sin here of where we're at right now with Indiana football is that they paid Tom Allen like a top 20 coach in college football. It is clear at this point, I think.
And gave him a top 20 contract. Top of that.
Yes. And to be clear, at the time, I and many others thought he deserved it. 2 years at Indiana, the way they played football for those 2 years, that did not happen to Indiana in a very long time. And it seemed like with Michael Penix in tow, it seemed like they could really make a run at some things in 21 and 22 and maybe beyond. And so they paid him. And it turns out the original sin of all of this is it turns out that as much as Jim, I think you and I can both say this, and I think most of our colleagues on the beat would agree, we like Tom Allen personally. We think he is, as you said, a good guy. He is not a top 20.
And it's rare that everybody has that consensus about a coach.
Absolutely, that's true. But he is just not the coach that he looked like in 2019 and 2020. And you are exactly right that the biggest issue has been the hires and the lack of firings.
Well, the coordinators that were around him at that time.
Yes. I mean, because he made 2 very good hires for the 2019 season. Kalen DeBoer and Kane Womack were very, very good hires. And I think that Kane Womack, when all is said and done, will be a terrific next coach at Indiana. Just to lay down a marker there.
Wow, man. I've heard that before. And I'm like, I personally, no more defensive-minded head coaches. I'm not a fan of defensive-minded head coaches.
Sure. If you want to go get the guy Justin Fry from Ohio State, that's fine with me. Offensive-minded guy, but fine. Anyway, those were great hires. He wasn't able to follow them. The biggest sins that Tom Allen has committed to Indiana are, one, keeping Darren Hiller around for as long as he did when it was obvious it wasn't working, and two, in 2020, when he had an opportunity to go out there and hire basically anyone from the G5 coordinator pool and say, you get to work with one of the strongest armed quarterbacks in the country. It was very obvious at the time how good Michael Penix was. He could have gone out and hired just about any G5 coordinator he wanted to come run that offense.
But if you listen to the show, that the day they announced that, you would hear me having gone off.
Yes. I think that at the time it was possible to say, well, he's made good hires before. He knows what he's doing. Give him the benefit of the doubt. I think in retrospect, it was obviously the wrong decision to hire internally for that. And I understand that Sheridan had been part of recruiting Penix, and so they wanted some continuity in that way. But I think that it was one of the few times in the history of Indiana football that they had a chance to really go make a splash and get someone really prominent, because they had just shown with Kalen DeBoer that you can go from being Indiana offensive coordinator to being a head coach at a significant program. They had shown that. And so for a long time, coaches have thought, I don't want to take that job at Indiana. That's not going to get me anywhere. And they had just gotten someone somewhere, and they had a chance, and they went out and hired someone who had never been a coordinator before, and it didn't work. And so,
John, how many times have you heard me say that over the last few years?
You've said it a bunch, for sure.
Yeah, and it's correct. There's just no way around it.
I will say this, and having had a conversation with someone else it related to you, they did open my eyes to something that it wasn't really as much Sheridan as it may have been Darren Hiller.
Yeah, because I think that's not the worst,
because Sheridan was actually the 2020 OC when they had the better year and was this close, and I mean this stinking close to going undefeated in the Big Ten East and playing in the Big Ten championship. Yeah. They were a pick six away, or those two fumbles in the first half in the 15 inside their own 15-yard line, or the Ohio State 15-yard line. It's like, oh my God, that would have been unbelievable. But that was during the COVID year. It started with a controversial score by Michael Penix at the end of the Penn State game that really started it all. If that didn't go their way, man, who knows how it goes anyway. But it was a great year. But it has, when the fans came back, it has just been nothing but downhill ever since. And it's just been, I think as much as I do love Tom Allen as a person, I never liked the hire for Indiana. I thought it was Indiana doing the Indiana thing, which is what I call it. Oh God, here Indiana goes again doing the Indiana thing. But they were also paying him $1.8 million to be the head coach, to be a head coach in the Big Ten, which was almost a joke in and of itself. But they could do that. So they saved money. But something you mentioned earlier, and I want to play back on, is the reason why they have to take care of this and take care of it now. The Big Ten is worth too much money, and it is about to be worth an unbelievable sum. It's going to be worth, to me, $100 million all said and done once they have to rework the next media deal with UCLA, USC, 2 LA teams, a Seattle team, a Portland team. You're adding all these TV markets. The dollars are just going to go up, the value of this Big Ten, and you just cannot be a joke. And Indiana football is a joke. It really is. That's what people see it as. I'm not saying that it is, because I know how hard those guys work. They work just as hard as anybody else. I'm not calling them a joke, but that's how they are viewed. And why do you want that if you are in charge of putting this program out, whether it doesn't matter if you're the AD or whomever you are, it's not acceptable. Shouldn't be.
And it shouldn't be, and because for a long time, Indiana has fallen back on, well, we're a basketball school, right? I think that's been the refrain. But you look around the country right now, look at some of the other basketball schools and what they're doing on the football field right now. Kentucky has shown you don't have to sacrifice football just to be good at basketball. They're having a fantastic football run right now in terms of their historical level of success. And if there were a super league in college football created right now with the top 30 or so teams, Kentucky's going to get an invite in the football super league, right? Duke, look at Duke. There is no reason Indiana cannot do what Duke has done with Mike Elko the last couple of years, other than they would not want to pony up for a coach of Mike Elko's stature, who is the offensive coordinator at Texas A&M, or the defensive coordinator, I should say, Texas A&M.
I have said that Kentucky is a program that Indiana needs to pattern after themselves. Dylan Sinn with the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette. Make sure you give him a follow. He has got tons of basketball coverage coming up there. If you're for those of you listening on 1380 The Fan in Fort Wayne, shout out to you. And make sure you stay tuned after Indiana Sports Beat for Brett Rump Sports. But Dylan, we'll see you soon, my friend.
Absolutely, absolutely, Jim. Always glad to be on. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Love to have you. We've got more coming up here on Indiana Sports Beat Radio, brought to you by the Ugly Grouper down on Anna Maria Island, Florida, for all our Floridians. Back with more right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Wow Food Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
In the market. Oh boy, I felt the voice going there.
Oh, yeah.
You got to have that coffee pre-made, baby, so I can do it that fast.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, I mean, I've got like a Keurig, but it's not the K Cup, and it drives me insane because right after they came out with this other cure that was going to be the thing, and they call it their Vue cups, VUE.
Yeah.
Nobody sells VUE cups.
All right. I don't know if Kyle's coming on. I haven't heard from him. I tried checking in with him, but we'll see.
All right.
Or go to mystonecrestliving.com. That's mystonecrestliving.com for more details. This segment is brought to you by Hank's Pizza Mac. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Wow Food Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Hey, welcome back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios, high atop the 18th fairway here from the Golf Club at Eagle Point. Hope everybody having a great day. Man, what a fun discussion with Dylan. I did not know he was a Michigan fan, which
I remember he mentioned it a while ago. It may have just been in passing, but I had heard him mention that one other time before, but it's been a bit.
Andrew jumping on from Fort Wayne. Appreciate you, man. And everybody up in the Fort Wayne area. Shout out again to our peeps at 1380 The Fan in Fort Wayne. Make sure you catch Caleb and Kenny in the mornings there, by the way. And then, of course, after Indiana Sports Beat on 1380, Brett Rump is up. So stay tuned for that as well. Andrew also says, how much moolah is left on Allen's contract? There's Kyle. We'll talk about that one later. It's a lot. More than Kyle's got in his pockets, I can promise you that. Kyle, how you doing, man?
Good. How are you, Jim?
Great. Just had a lovely, fun conversation about Michigan, and I wonder if we got anybody in Indiana football that's got some spies out there. I mean, it's funny. I remember back when I was a youngster and I was actually coaching high school football, there was always talk about how you got to be careful, but people would go scout teams. They would go watch them play, but the filming of the sidelines and all that. And then yesterday you had Kirby Smart saying, yeah, I've never even heard of anybody doing that. So I know that's not your beat, but I know you're also aware of what's going on. Just what's your take on the Michigan situation? That's kind of a serious deal.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've seen people, probably mostly Michigan fans, who are like, whatever, get over it. But, yeah. But at the same time, it's, there's a certain element of sign stealing that, growing
is
up
acceptable.
I mean, even playing high school baseball, we would have someone sort of assigned to just sit there and sort of figure out what they're calling. I go to games now and I'm like, that's still kind of, and I didn't even do it, but I would be interested in how we did it. And I would, I'll even sit at my kids' games now and try to, I don't pass them along but I try to figure out the signs just because it's sort of a fun thing to do. But I don't know, this takes it to another extent, sending, it's sort of along the lines of the Patriots Rams thing way back when they were filming practices. And that to me, it's sort of like the Astros thing too, where, that to me definitely crosses the line of, using technology and that sort of thing. That's beyond the pale of competitive, sports. I mean, sending obviously what Michigan's doing, as I understand it, sending this guy to games and, all that stuff is not allowed, not allowable. So,
well, now it's coming out that he went to SEC title games and teams that they were potentially going to play in the college football playoffs. So now you've stepped it outside of the league, and that is just going to add to it.
Yeah, I saw some video yesterday of when they were playing Ohio State, and it looked like they had something figured out, and they were relaying the sign, to the players, and and I guess that's all. At that point, that's not illegal, but clearly they'd probably done something illegal to get those signs. So I don't know. It's too bad. It casts another, it's yet another black eye for Big Ten. It just seems like it's never ending with Big Ten teams and, stupid things happening. So this is just another thing. Unfortunately, it's probably your best team. I mean, them or Ohio State, I would say Michigan's probably the better team this year again, but it's terrible timing and obviously they did it to themselves, but yeah, I don't like it. I know there's a lot of explanations out there and excuses out there, but it seems like what they're doing here is illegal.
Yeah. But here in Indiana, the playoffs have begun, and this week they really get kicked into gear with the 5 and the 6A teams, and some big ones coming up, I'm sure. What are you looking forward to?
Yeah, there's a lot of really good games. This is sort of the backyard brawl section of the schedule where you got a lot of teams who have played each other during the season are rematching, or you have teams that, have played last year and kind of get another chance to play. But, I would say around here, probably the best game is or probably anywhere in the state is the Brownsburg-Ben Davis game, number 1 versus number 3. You're going to have one of these two teams knocked out, who has state championship aspirations and realistic aspirations. I remember last year after this game, John Hart from Brownsburg, even after they won the game against Ben Davis, he said, you know what, we could have a couple third graders in a box of crayons and come up with a better system for playoffs than we have right now. Basically meaning like, yeah, we knocked out. Ben Davis was a top 10 team that year, and obviously is again this year. So that was his take on it, even after a win. So, but yeah, this year I think both teams even probably better than a year ago. So, I think that'll be a fantastic matchup. Greenfield Central and New Pal in Class 4A. That's another huge game, rivalry game. Two teams that play in the conference against each other, and Greenfield Central's kind of been a team that's been on the upswing, but they've lost 14 in a row to New Pal over the years, and New Pal obviously has been one of the premier teams in the state in any class, so that'll be a good one. Chittard and Guerin Catholic in 3A, another rematch of an overtime game. Center Grove could get. I think they could get pushed a bit by Franklin Central. They're only 4-5, but they gave Center Grove all they could handle last year. It was a game that went late into the fourth quarter. Center Grove was actually down in that game late in the fourth quarter and put together a drive and won, and then, of course, went on to win state again. So, if they don't get through that game, obviously that changes the course of history a bit. So that could be tough. And Franklin Central's a team that, they've been looking forward to a rematch, and kind of everything is geared towards this game. So that'll be a good one too. So yeah, there's a lot of good ones. Those are 4 of the best. LC at Lawrence Central and Lawrence North. That's always a great rivalry. That'll be a good game. And I think either one of those teams is capable of beating Cathedral in the next round and winning a sectional title. So, I think that'll be a good game too. So there's a lot of them. There's a whole slew of really good games this week.
Now, a lot of times we see teams, some of the best teams slated to play right off the bat. What game or games is that's going to happen this week? Because there's fewer teams in the 6A class. So that's why they have a week off, I assume, right? Yeah,
they that kind of gets them back in line with the rest of the state. But and it's I kind of have liked it, for the sake of those teams get a chance to rest up and get ready for the next round. And I don't know, not everybody loves it, but you have to do something. You have to have the bye somewhere. You either have to do it there or probably right before the state finals. So they choose to do it there instead. But yeah, I'd say, obviously the best of the ones you're talking about, there's the Brownsburg-Ben Davis game. And, the way the tournament's currently aligned, I mean, it's not, you're either going to play this week or next week. So it's to me, it's not a huge thing. If you're going to change the tournament somehow, I would say in 5A and 6A, just make it totally different where you see the top 16 on the north and south and make it that instead of, just seeding the sectional is not going to change a whole lot. So, but yeah, I definitely that one. And, there's, like I said, there's several others that are that are good games too. But yeah, one of those teams will be, unfortunately, their season will be over on October 27th, and you guess some of those guys move on to basketball and some move on to wrestling, and then the rest of them, that'll be the end of their high school career.
Speaking of which, you've covered Center Grove, and you covered Center Grove when Taven Jackson was running a gauntlet there. Center Grove very good during that time. He's been embroiled in a quarterback race at Indiana, in and out, and Indiana has been just back and forth. Have you been able to see that from afar, even though I know you've been busy doing covering your own beat?
Yeah, sort of on the periphery, watching it as most college football is for me. Trying to keep up with some of the guys who played, and I don't always do the best job, or you kind of lose track just doing your own thing at the high school level. And but it's fun to see what they end up doing. I know it hasn't been probably what he's wanted to be, or anybody on the IU side. That offense has really obviously struggled, but yeah, I mean, Taven's always been a guy who, covering him in high school, he's sort of has risen to the occasion and played well in the bigger games. And I thought he might have that in him this year to be able to do that again. Obviously, it's hard coming in right away, and you're not surrounded by, not comparing high school to college, but you're not surrounded by like the talent he was at that level, like he was in Center Grove. So it's just it's a lot. You have to be able to. Quarterback's so important at the college level, but you have to obviously have a lot of good players around you too. And I think it's just been a combination of things probably for him to contribute to what this season's been.
Yeah, you definitely can't say that he has. He probably had more talent on around with Center Grove if you wanted to compare it. Yeah, right. Than he does now. And the only thing he's been doing or having issues with really is just I think he is got to catch up to making the reads quicker, which both of those quarterbacks do. His passing has just been off a bit. He's just not, his accuracy has just kind of not been there, throwing some picks, but it's not like doesn't look like he belongs or anything like that. He's just off a little bit, and I think he just needs a little maturity.
Yeah, and I mean, he was, even in high school, he wasn't always the most accurate all the time, so that I did wonder about that going in, but he's definitely got as you kind of said there, I mean, he looks the part, and I thought he would even at that level, because he's got the physical tools and he's got the ability to make the throws that need to be made. So, that's the thing. It's just the consistency, I guess, is the word. I mean, you're just looking to get that out of him, and who knows what the future holds for him. Hopefully he's got the time, and I know there some talk about future of the coaching staff and whatever, so there's a lot of things to before next year happens, obviously, but as far as that goes, you hope everything sort of aligns itself for his sake, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of moving parts, I guess, at this point. So but yeah, I mean, he's definitely got the tools. I think it's just a matter of time, experience, gaining consistency and those type of things.
So switching back to the high school ranks, we didn't mention really talk about the 5A. What are you expecting there? Who are you looking forward to this week?
Yeah, in 5A, I mean, you've got Bloomington North and Bloomington South play each other this week, and that'll be a rematch of a game that Bloomington North won earlier in the season, and in overtime it was 25-24. So Bloomington North is ranked number 1. Bloomington South is number 3. Bloomington South has probably been overall maybe the more impressive team, you could say, but they did lose that game in overtime, like I said. So that's a huge one. That's definitely sort of the equivalent of Brownsburg Ben Davis at the 5A level is that one. 5A is really an interesting class because I think it's pretty wide open as far as that goes. I think as far as the state champion and maybe a little bit similar to 6A, where you don't have a kind of an all-out favorite in that class. So Plainfield and Harrison out of Lafayette, though, that game will be really big along those lines. I think the winner of that game could be a team that could make it a long way. Decatur's playing on the other side of that bracket. They have a tough game as well against McCutcheon. They should get through that, I believe, and move on. But that sectional is really interesting. I think the winner of that sectional could be the favorite to make it all the way to state. But yeah, I mean, those are probably the two best games in 5A. And then, you've got some other games around here, like Whiteland. They don't have a really difficult game this week, but they're a team that made it to state last year that could potentially, they're not as talented this year, but they kind of have that DNA in them of a championship team. So you do wonder if they could make a run. Franklin at Terre Haute South is a good game. That game was a 35-34 game last year. So again, those are roughly 500 teams. Franklin's 5-4, Terre Haute South 4-5. So I don't know how far they can make it, but that should be a good opening round game. And Evansville North, and I know your Floyd Central team, that could be a good game as well. Evansville North beat them last year in the sectional 24-7. Floyd is 8-1 this year. Evansville North 6-3. So that's another good one in 5A. But that 5A is just it's interesting because it's very wide open.
Where's the Floyd game being played?
I think it's at Floyd. I'm pretty sure. I just looked at that. So yeah, it's at home for them.
Perfect. What's up next for you, brother?
Just I've got a couple stories coming tomorrow, including our predictions and getting into some. I'm actually covering state cross country Saturday. I've got the Ben Davis Brownsburg game Friday, and then we should start having our basketball stuff rolling out here before too long. Probably not next week, but the week after.
Perfect. Make sure you give Kyle Neddenriep a follow. He's got all of the playoff coverage coming up for Indiana high school football, and then it'll be basketball season. Kyle, thank you so much, brother.
You bet. Thanks, Jim.
You bet. Hey, we got more coming up here. The great one, Rick Bozich, joins us next. We're going to talk some basketball, along other things, right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Wow Food Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington. Morning, Rick.
Hi. What's going on, everybody?
How are you, brother?
I'm okay. How are you? What do you got, Penix? What?
What does it say, Jim? Penix
Envy.
Penix Envy, baby.
Yeah.
Come on.
Who's selling that? Washington?
I saw this. I forget what I was looking for, but I saw this, and as soon as I saw that, I was like, "Yep, gotta have that." That's hilarious. I thought it was just hilarious. I'm like, "Damn, whoever thought of that? That's funny." I love a good marketer. Man, how about baseball? Damn it. I thought the Phillies were going to do it. Indiana still has a guy in there, Sal Frank. And him and Schwarber faced each other.
Yeah, he walked him last night.
And then, was that? Yeah. Man. I fell asleep at the end of that one, but I was hoping the Phils. I don't know why. Maybe for Schwarber, but the Diamondbacks. I don't know how much excitement that's going to bring, but
very little.
You could tell though in Philadelphia, the buzz level just never got below an 8. It could have been between innings, and it was just like you could feel the energy there. And I was like, oh, that's part of the reason why I'd hope that they would win. I love seeing that because not a lot of places you see that. It's because I think it's Philadelphia. It's a great sports town. Now we're looking at the Texas Rangers and the Diamondbacks. Very, very subdued Arizona crowd. They'll probably have some wine as they're watching the game. But is what it is. But you got the Louisville kid from Trinity. I noticed on your post, Trinity and Bellarmine. Bellarmine's got to be happy.
Brandon fought. Yep.
I played on the same field with him, but not with him, as him. We had some high school games on that field back in the day.
They got nice facilities at Bellarmine. What's new in Bloomington?
Oh,
Dude, we'll save it. We're coming back. Don't say anything just yet.
and now fresh seafood. Chop Shop Market and Table has the largest selection of in-house made products around and everything you need to make a gourmet meal at home. Or pick out a tomahawk steak or a grouper filet and enjoy it cooked to perfection in Chop Shop Steakhouse. Chop Shop Market and Table, a part of the Wow Food Group, is your butcher, baker, and fish house, no matter where you live.
This segment is brought to you by Bubba's 33 in Clarksville and Evansville. Pizza, burgers, beer. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Cordy, presented by Wow Food Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Hey, welcome back. It's October 25, Wednesday, Hump Day. And to get us over the hump, our man Rick Bozich from WDRB.com. Make sure you give him a follow. If you're not a true sports fan, because Rick he's omnipresent. He's omnipotent. He's all kinds of omni things, but we're grateful to have him. Hey man, yesterday I was fortunate to have Fran Fraschilla on with us. And It was an absolute blast. He was on with Mike DeCourcy when Mike comes on. But Fran was just an absolute blast to have on. Such a wealth of knowledge, but does it as such a down-to-earth guy, like you can tell, like yourself. He's the guy that you want to sit down and have a beer with or, whatever, and just enjoy a fun time, fun conversation. But great times with him. I know that you know Fran very well.
Yeah, I mean, Fran's just a great. You're right. He is a really good guy. He was a good coach for a while, and then he transitioned into the broadcast game. And I wish they'd have him on more Big Ten games, but he's pretty much of a Big 12. He's their Big 12 go-to guy. And I really like Fran. Both of his sons are involved in the game too. I think one's in the NBA and one's in college basketball as assistant coaches. And I think one of them played at Harvard. I know he did. He's a good family guy and very smart basketball mind. And as you mentioned, he usually makes time for about everybody who asks him.
Absolutely great. And it was fun to have him. Yeah. Cause I did mention, I said, hey, next time you're in Bloomington, dinner's on me. And he goes, well, I'll have to wait for my Fox contract to happen because he won't be covering any IU games. And I'm like,
right.
He's
a Big 12.
Oh yeah. Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up Jim Harbaugh and the Michigan saga that continues to seem like it never ends under his tenure. On some ways you gotta, people say, well, he was forward thinking. You go back to when he took his team on that tour of practices or whatever to get around some of the rules. And then he was just suspended. And now this comes out, and this is the biggest of all because this goes to the core of epic cheating. This might exceed Bill Belichick at New England. I mean, this is, and then today, of course, it's coming out about that same guy going to the SEC championship and scouting SEC teams.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I have several opinions on this. The first one is just embarrassment for the University of Michigan. I mean, you're the University of Michigan. You've got every advantage you could possibly have, but it's still not enough. And you've got to do stuff like this to make sure that you can beat Rutgers and Maryland and Indiana and Purdue. I mean, it's ridiculous. First of all, it shows a whole level of insecurity that's staggering to me. And secondly is, I know that a lot of people do steal signs. It's very apparent. That's why they have those screens up in front and in back. That's why coaches cover their mouth when they talk into the headsets.
And it's totally legal.
Right. But even among coaches, there's a line of ethical sign stealing. If you can do it, when you're in the building and you can pick something up, but to send somebody to away games and buy tickets on both sides of the field and take videos and then have a former Marine who's involved in intelligence operations to try and break down people's signs, that's taking it way beyond what everybody else is doing. And, frankly, I would hope the University of Michigan, considering its standing in the academic world, would take the steps of being taking this very seriously and punishing their own people. But I'm not going to hold my breath waiting for it to happen.
Nope. And not only that, I mentioned in the last segment with Dylan Sinn, who was on with me, and we were talking about it. What are the chances that anything actually happens this year to prevent this team from benefiting from what they've done and potentially winning a national championship? It doesn't matter. See, it doesn't matter if you later on, they didn't win it. Bulls, SHL, you know what? We saw it. It happened. You let them do it. This is different than the Louisville basketball thing a couple of years ago, because that was not that kind of crap it didn't mean much to me then. And I'm not a Louisville fan, but I'm like, I don't care if you had strippers in there. I'm like going, that dude, there was all kinds of stuff people would do in that regard. So that just buying players when it was it legal? Was okay.
A way of cheating of trying to get an edge on the field. This is trying to get a competitive advantage. That's what it is. And going beyond what anybody else has ever done. I'm sure Michigan fans, if I read the responses on Twitter accurately, are claiming this is a Ryan Day arranged story because of his friendship with Pete Thamel, and that Ryan Day's just salty because he hasn't been able to beat Michigan the last 2 years, so he has to come up with an excuse. Okay.
Well, it's funny. Sure is funny. A lot of smoke there.
It's not just at Ohio State this has happened. It's happened at, I think, 12 of the other 13 Big Ten schools. I don't know if Indiana is one of them or not.
I was going to say, if they came to Indiana, I'm going to laugh my ass off.
Yeah, it's embarrassing if you're Michigan. It's embarrassing if Michigan, if that's what you have to do to beat Indiana, if you're that insecure. It's just, I would hope somebody in the college football playoff or other coaches in the game would stand up and push the story forward and say, hey, you got to do something to these guys now. Don't do something later. But that's not going to happen. And Michigan's just going to delay and stall and string it out. And then the playoffs will go on, and they might get punished retroactively, and that'll be meaningless. And that's I'd like
Jim Harbaugh will be gone. He'll be gone already by then.
Yeah, he'll be in the NFL. I'd like to see somebody step up and say, hey, this is ridiculous. We need to do something about this. These guys need to be punished. But
the closest we've come to that is Kirby Smart saying, I've never heard of anything like this happening. Right. What is going on up there? He goes, I don't know of anything that happened with him. I didn't see him anything, but he went about as far as he could go at that time, pretty much saying, but I've never heard of anybody doing anything like this.
Right. And I thought last night the story went to the next level where I think somebody showed some video of that dude standing next to the defensive coordinator of Michigan and whispering and telling him like what defense he was getting the signals, he was stealing them, is what they were suggesting. And he was telling the defensive coordinator what defense to run against the play that was coming. I mean, it's just staggering. And I know that every school, obviously they all try and read each other's signs. That's why they, like I said, they go to the trouble of doing all the different things they do. And at some point, the technology will become better, like it is in baseball now, where you're not stealing signs from second base anymore because they have pitch comm. And in the NFL, don't they give the play to the quarterback he has a earpiece in his, yeah.
And that's about to come to college, by the way.
Yeah. And yeah, I'm sure it is. And it should. But this is bad. This is bad. And Harbaugh's already got the other thing that he was dealing with about what didn't they like do some kind of evaluation during the COVID period they weren't supposed to do? I don't know. He's got some other issue with the NCAA. So
they're always they've been in trouble for. It seems like it started at the end of he lost to what 7 straight times to Ohio State.
Yeah, and he wasn't getting the job done, and I think he took a pay cut, didn't he? Restructured.
They had to restructure his contract.
Right.
Funny how things may have started about that time to turn around. Yet Sergeant Schultz, I know nothing. I know nothing. That's what you're going to get, but I don't think you can escape this. It's crazy.
I mean, it's par for. Let's remember, Michigan's the home of the Fab Five. So, in terms of playing by the rules, it's an elective at Michigan.
Exactly. Does the NCAA use this as a way of showing, well, hey, we're not sissies. We just because we don't punish the basketball programs that lay the golden eggs, we're gonna lay this one down because again, Jim Harbaugh's leaving. There's one way or another, whether he gets fired, which I doubt, though. He'll just say, you know what, I'm going to go on to the NFL because I'm tired of dealing with this stuff, yada, yada. But this is an opportunity for I think the Big Ten needs to step up because if you're waiting for the NCAA, I'm just going to say, don't hold your breath.
You know, the NCAA doesn't have the will, it doesn't have the manpower, and it doesn't have the organizational skill to take care of this in the amount of time it needs to be taken care of. And they'll have to prove me wrong. I'd be happy if they did prove me wrong, but does anybody really think the NCAA is going to take care of this before the playoff comes? There's no way.
Well, no, that's another thing. It says this, the Big Ten would probably wait until the NCAA completed their investigation to make sure that they have all of, if they could, but that this probably would not happen until 2024. Well, I'm like, well, what the hell's the point of that? If you can't act quickly, it's pointless.
It's the first real defining moment for Big Ten commission, the new Big Ten commissioner. What's he going to do about it? I really haven't heard that many comments from him, but he needs to be at the forefront of this because it's in fact affecting competitive balance in his league, and it affects the other 13 schools adversely. So he needs to step up and get the league involved in this.
Absolutely. And then speaking of things going the other way, Indiana football. I don't know. I don't know. Spend a whole lot of time on it because they have a game this week that is basically it's not winnable for Indiana. And I hate to say that about any time of a competition that's upcoming, but I think that there is nothing in me that can even say that there is a remote chance of anything close to that happening. So that's going to put Indiana at 2-6, meaning they would have to go on a 4-game Big Ten winning streak to become bowl eligible. That is not going to happen. So again, you're not going to be bowl eligible. My problem is, with all these contracts, some of them that are very poorly written, always in the favor of the coach, which that's fine to give them clauses to reach certain levels, but why are there not also clauses that will dock you if you do not perform on the field or whatever the case may be? There's no other work environment on planet Earth that allows that to happen unless you're the CEO of a company, which most of us are not in either of those positions. We have to perform or we're out of a job. If we are not fortunate to have the great listeners and audience that we do, I tell them every day, there's no point in me being here. I'm boom, out of a job. If nobody cared about all the great content you produce, WDRB.com wouldn't have you, but they do, and they do for a reason. They don't need to put a caveat like that in your contract or mine or anything like that. But why do coaches get such special treatment?
It's a great question, and I don't know when it started, but it's been going on now for too long, and I'm sure they all argue that their punishment for not performing is the extra year isn't added onto the contract the way it is when they do perform, and they always need that 4-year cushion so they're not at a competitive disadvantage while recruiting, that somebody can say, well, he's only got a few years left on his contract. He might not be there when you're there. But for Indiana football, there's two questions. There's the micro and there's the macro. And the micro is this season. And, when you can't beat Rutgers at home and you're not even competitive, really, you can't beat Maryland. Now you've lost to both of those teams 3 years in a row. You're not going to win 4 in a row to end the season. We know that this season is over. They might win one more game, right? At the most.
Which
it's what they need to be focusing on is the macro. What about next year? What about fielding a competitive team next year? What about getting fans excited to come to games again next year?
What about keeping players on the roster?
Keeping players on the roster. What about turning the ship around from back to back to back seasons of finishing last in the Big Ten East and, not accepting that anymore? And, we all know that without the buyout, it'd be a no-brainer. There would be a change, but they're going to have a serious level conversations of like, what is the cost of keeping the current coaching staff and what is the cost of changing the coaching staff and figuring out what's the wisest course of action. And, I think we've said for a while that there's no way they're going to pay the $20 million, but when you think about, and I know that Greg Doyle wrote about this last week, when you think about the cost of keeping him, I mean, how are you going to get people excited to sell tickets for next season? How are you going to get people excited about coming to games next season? I mean, that's going to be a huge, huge challenge. How are you going to get guys to come in out of the portal? It's going to be a big challenge. So I don't know what the answer is. But it's when you look around the country, you watch. Virginia's been awful. Virginia rises up and beats North Carolina. Duke used to be a laughing. They're coming into Louisville as a top 20 team, which has only lost to Notre Dame and Florida State. I can come up with more. Washington State has traditionally not been a great program. They're winning. Oregon State's winning. I mean, you got to find a way to figure it out, man. And I don't, it's got to be a commitment by Indiana University to take football more seriously. That's where it all begins. By the president, by the board of trustees. I think the fans, I've sensed it more from the fans and the media of, being less accepting of, what's happening. But that the will to get better has to come from the administration.
Absolutely. And then you have to ask, okay, let's say they do that. That's a ton of money.
It is
to worry about, but you have a ton of money that's going to be coming in, and how you can't continue to go in this league and not care about football, because this league is getting more and more difficult, and You're going to get pushed further and further down. And when Dylan was on earlier, he said that, 10 years when there's a super league, he goes, Indiana is not going to get an invite. I don't care how good their basketball program is, because it's going to turn out to be like the Big East, when they used to have a bunch of great basketball programs, but they didn't have football.
Right. No, there's no doubt about that. They'll be in a secondary league or third level league, even at this point. I mean, there's no way they would get an invite. So I don't know. They just have this is the price they're paying for not taking football seriously in the 90s and the 2000s, and when they didn't really take it seriously till Fred Glass, more seriously until Fred Glass decided to do some of the projects at the stadium and hire Kevin Wilson. And I know that Kevin Wilson's tenure ended poorly, but he at least was a step in the right direction. And Terry Hepner, I think, was a step in the right direction too. But I don't know. It's when you look around and see what other schools who should have fewer resources than Indiana are able to do in football, it's just mind-boggling that they've got themselves at the point that they're at right now. And I don't know, the whole quarterback thing this year, it just comes across as I don't know the right word, just inept. I mean, the whole way they've handled the quarterback situation, like you're trying to get a competitive advantage or puzzle the other team by who you're going to play. No, you're not. You just come across as indecisive and you don't know what you're doing. You can't settle on a plan.
Absolutely. But to me, that goes to the core. And actually, when you have Rod Carey come in, now you change OCs, and then he has to go through the process to determine his quarterback. And I wrote this in our prediction for the last game. I predicted again. I said at the beginning of the season that Brendan Sorsby was going to be the starter, but I was proven to be, quote, wrong. I said, I don't think that I was then, and I still don't think that I am. I think that you're going to see Brendan Sorsby be the starter after Rod Carey has made the decision. And that is another indictment on the inability to recognize talent, to acknowledge the right way to go, and to develop that. Because let's say Brendan Sorsby had taken every snap from game one, Indiana would probably be in a little bit better shape. And people could say, well, you could say for the same for Jackson. I don't know that I agree with that, because I thought Sorsby was going to be the guy. And that's because of conversations I had, not because I just guessed at that. And so now, and that's exactly what happened. Now, he had a rough day against Michigan, but guess what? It was freaking Michigan. They're allowing 6 points a game. So let's see how he goes the rest of the year. But that's just an indictment on the decision-making and how and why decisions are made under the staff. And that's what is putting them in at peril, I think.
Well, beyond that, Jim, let's be honest. Quarterback is a leadership position. You have to put somebody in that position that the rest of the team will look to as a leader. And when you're not able to commit to one guy and show that you consider them the leader, it makes it harder for the rest of the team to consider him a leader. So I'm sure you got some guys that are saying, I think Jackson needs to be the guy. And other guys are saying, yeah, I think Sorsby needs the guy. And that doesn't help in terms of building the kind of cohesiveness and team building exercises you need to have within a football team. I mean, it doesn't. I mean, it's not the way that good teams handle the quarterback position. It's just not. And the whole thing about I know who the quarterback is and I'm not going to tell you after, like, you've played that card like 7 times. It's laughable. It doesn't matter who the quarterback is, right? I mean, until the rest of the team gets better. Tom Brady could have played quarterback for Indiana last week and they weren't going to beat Rutgers.
Exactly. And I don't know why. Again, I think that just goes to indecisiveness of not knowing. And that's another reason why I'm not in favor of a defensive-minded head coach. I want a guy who's offensive-minded, which I know defense is of uber importance, but get yourself a great defensive coordinator, as good as you could be. Like, look what Indiana would have been if Kevin Wilson hadn't have been, the bad things of Kevin Wilson, him and Tom Allen, that would have been, Indiana would have been something.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can do it either way. You can look at Rutgers has done it by going defense. Schiano's a defensive guy. The message that was sent Saturday is the worst possible message. If you let Rutgers, a team that you should be better than, come into your stadium and become bowl eligible in the middle of October on your field, that's just a terrible visual. On the flip side, then Maryland's done it with offense. You can do it either way, but what you have to do is pick the course that you're going to be on and stick with it. You can't keep vacillating about, no, we're going to be a running attack. No, we're going to be an option attack. No, we're going to pass the ball. I mean, you have to have a plan. And I'm sure they'll say they do have a plan, but if you're sitting and watching it all unfold, it's hard to tell what the plan is.
Absolutely. We've got to take a break. Rick Bozich from WDRB.com with us. We'll be back with more Indiana Sports Beat Radio, brought to you by our good friends down at Bubba's 33 in Clarksville, right off of I-65 on Veterans Parkway. Pizza, burgers, beer. Back with more right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Wow Food Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
In the market.
What else?
What are you? Oh, well.
First exhibition game Sunday?
Sunday. Yep. I had some tacos last night.
Did you go to Taco Bell?
I did not.
No. Where's the Taco Bell?
It is out by the mall.
Oh, okay.
Off of 3rd Street. It's not that far from campus, really, because the frat houses and all of that stuff, you know, if you were leaving out the back of the complex, I'll call it, you know, the baseball field and all that, and going out on 46 and turn right, and then went up there and then turned
left.
Yeah,
on
just keep on the bypass. Just follow that on around. That bumps into 3rd.
Take a left.
And then it's just down on the left.
By that McDonald's there, sort of?
You know what? I'm not familiar enough with that. And I have a funny tidbit that I'll have to tell you off that just makes it even more hilarious. But
oh my gosh. I can only imagine.
Nothing to do with him, but it's to do with, just adds a little irony to the story. What are you doing this weekend?
Duke is in here to play Louisville. Pretty big game, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, how about Duke?
Hey, they're fun to watch.
They are.
I don't know.
Michigan State's going to have to find more than 20 million, brother. I think. I don't think they're getting out of it for less than 35.
And Indiana's got what? It's Penn State, then Wisconsin at home.
Yep.
At
then, Illinois, Michigan, and Purdue to finish it out.
At Illinois, Michigan State at home, at Purdue. The last three,
I mean, most winnable. Which is why the Rutgers game was so important, because you would have already been at three.
I mean, they drove down the field on the first possession and scored, and then
same thing they did against Michigan. I just don't understand. I don't understand it anymore. It's a mess of a program.
Yep. What you gonna do?
You got to do something. That you have to do something at some measure to be able to market it, though. I mean, how can you bring back the same group intact and try and get people excited about going to football games?
And this is a weird thing to say, and we got actually I'll have to say this later. We're about to come back from break, but here we go.
040, the golf club at Eagle Point in Bloomington.
This segment is brought to you by Reynolds Family Dentistry in Sellersburg. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Wow Food Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio, here on this Wednesday with Rick Bozich of WDRB.com. Make sure you're following Rick for all your sports content. Rick, you have a great game to cover this weekend. Louisville hosting Duke.
Yeah, Duke is one of the surprise teams really in the country. It's year 2 for that Mike Elko, who I think used to be at Notre Dame, and then he was at Texas A&M, and he's like a hot commodity out in the coaching world. It would be interesting to see if Duke can keep him there. But Florida State's the lone unbeaten left in the ACC. Louisville is one of 4 teams with 1 loss. And they've got 5 games left, 4 of them at home. So the schedule is very favorable for Louisville. They got 3 straight conference home games. How about that? They got Duke, Virginia Tech, and Virginia. Then they go to Miami and finish up with Kentucky. So Louisville's got a lot to play for this year. A lot to play for.
Yeah, and Jeff Brum's first year. So congratulations to Jeff and all of the Brums, which that is making that hire look better and better. And that's exactly what you want.
Especially with Satterfield 0-5, losing of his last 5 games at Cincinnati.
I still can't believe that worked out the way it did. He left on his own accord, right?
Yeah, he left on his own accord, and Cincinnati had to pay Louisville a buyout to take a coach that they wanted to get rid of. I mean, when has that ever happened?
It's Louisville is making more money for doing nothing than any school in the country. They're getting $1 million from Indiana to not play.
And they picked up James Madison. That's the replacement game for that. James Madison. They announced it this week.
Who, Indiana?
No, Louisville. James Madison.
The Dukes. The Dukes are not bad.
No, they beat Virginia this year, I think.
Who just upset? Who did they just upset?
Early in the year, I think they beat Virginia.
No. Virginia just upset somebody.
Oh, Virginia upset North Carolina at North Carolina.
Oh, yeah. I was waiting for them to go down. Every year I'm like, North Carolina cannot be that good.
Brown. Yeah, he always throws in a clunker or two. That's why Louisville has a chance to go to the ACC championship game. If North Carolina has 2 or 3 hard games left on the road, they could lose another one. If Louisville can win out in the league games, they'll be in the ACC championship game, man.
Against the Seminoles.
How about that?
Oh,
the Seminoles quarterback is a former Cardinal.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Jordan Travis started here as a backup to Lamar Jackson, and he left after they fired Petrino. So,
well, if I was a backup to Lamar Jackson, I'd leave too. Because you ain't playing, brother. Although you may see some fourth quarter action.
I'm interested to see some basketball. Basketball on Sunday, right?
Exhibition game. First look at Indiana's new squad. Yep. I would think that you'd get to see a lot of the players, most if not all. First look at a rejuvenated Xavier Johnson, Trey Galloway to see if he's shooting the ball more. Of course, Mackenzie Mbako to see his talents, whether he is his shooting, his style of play. Of course, Khalil Ware, what he is going to do, what kind of role he's going to have in this offense, what the offense is going to look like. Malik Renew, CJ Gunn, and Caleb Banks, how have they progressed? There's so many different storylines to look at there that will be interesting. I know it's an exhibition game, but that's when you try to put all this stuff out there.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the 3 guys I guess I'm most curious to watch are CJ Gunn, because Indiana's had a huge need for a 3-point shooter for a number of years. That's his calling card. We've heard a lot of talk about it. He's improved as a shooter. He wasn't very good last year. What was he, 2 for 25 from 3, something like that?
Something like that.
Yeah. So he needs to. Caleb Banks is a guy I think showed a lot of potential last year as a player. We'll see how he fits in. And the other one is Peyton Sparks. I think Peyton Sparks is the guy that is most overlooked on this team. He was a productive player at Ball State. He's not going to have the same kind of numbers at IU because he's moving up in talent. He's a little bit undersized to be an inside guy, but he is a solid player, and I think he'll have 2 or 3 games this year. I think he'll be a difference maker for Indiana.
Absolutely. I'm interested to see what someone like Anthony Walker's going to do. A big guy, dude. He is. When I say big, he is like Shaq big, not tall. He's still 6'11", I think.
6'9" or 6'10", I think.
Boy, though, if he puts an ass into you're going to know it, and that's going to come in handy in Big Ten play. Especially
we were there last year,
like Zach Edey.
We were there last year in Albany when we watched Miami play against Indiana, and they just kept bringing in dude after dude after dude, and say, man, they got a lot of dudes that could run the floor and play defense. he could play defense. They made it hard for Indiana to score last year. Another guy's Cups. I think a lot of people want to see what Gabe Cups can do, especially with the news in the aftermath of the news last week that Boogie Flan's not coming to Indiana. That Gabe Cups is pretty much center stage right now to be the point guard next year, and he's going to get significant minutes this year as the backup point guard. So there'll be a lot of interest in seeing what Gabe Cups can do.
Are you coming up Sunday?
I'm not coming up Sunday, but I'll get up there probably for the first. When's the first home game?
Oh man, I don't have the schedule up, but it's got to be. They have another exhibition after that, so yeah, that sounds about right. So probably 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think if it's on Tuesday night, Louisville plays their first game on. I think it's November 7th, and I think Indiana might play the next night. So I'll try and come up for the first home game.
Look forward to seeing you.
All right, I look forward to being there.
Rick Bozich from WDRB.com. Couldn't be happier to have him on, and very thankful, sir. Have a great rest of your week and enjoy your weekend,
everybody.
Big thanks to Dylan Sinn from the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette, Kyle Neddenriep from the Indy Star, of course, but most importantly, thanks to each and every one of you. Without you, we have no reason to be here, and we are grateful that you give us that time and your effort. And sorry I could not get to more of the comments today. There were many, many great ones, but you guys just keep them coming. We love you. Until tomorrow, for John the producer, I'm Jim Coyle. I will see you on the radio.
Thanks for listening to Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube page for more clips and team coverage of Indiana basketball, football, and more. You can also find full episodes and tons of other content on thehoosier.com. We'll see you next time for another edition of Indiana Sports Beat Radio.